Now we're suddenly on a 10-win streak, so here's a perfect time to be like, hello YouTube, this is the deck profile for the Zombie World deck that we got to Plat 1 with, that we just continued to streak with after getting to Plat 1 into a 10-0 undefeated win streak. Look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can count the rest of the numbers. Absolutely no losses. Editor, edit this out. But here's the deck, okay? It's Zombie World, and it is the most pure version of Zombie World that I have decided to play all of Master Duels ever. And honestly, it's more viable now thanks to the fact that we have Baron de Fleur. So, what's Zombie World? Zombie World is a card. You guessed it. But it's also a card that synergizes well with other cards. That's right, zombie cards. So the main two cards are Zombie World as your main field spell that you want to prioritize all your plays on, and your Doom King Baller Drunk, which is like your boss monster. That's right, a main deck boss monster. Who could have thought? But that's right, even in 2022, Zombie World is here and it exists and it does a thing. Okay, so the whole idea is Zombie World turns all monsters on the field and in the graveyards into zombies. So both players. So that means my Halky Fibrax machine, psych, it's a zombie now. Your virtual world monster that you thought was a psychic monster, I don't know, are they psychic types? It's a zombie now. It doesn't matter what its original type was. That's the whole point of it. Whether it's in the graveyard or in the field, everything is a zombie type. So why that matters is because you have shenanigans where you could then be like, hey, you know, your effects that you're activating as now zombie type monsters, well, I have a boss monster here that likes to respond to that. Doom King Baller Drunk is like when a zombie monster activates its effect anywhere, any player's zombie monster, you could either choose to negate that effect or banish one monster from the field or graveyards. Non-targetably, by the way, which is like, that's so cool. I hope you know that non-targeting banish is like so great. So where's the whole synergy? Well, let's say you have a Halky Fibrax on the field and you want to tag it out into a tutored synchro monster from your extra deck. Well, now Doom King Baller Drunk is like, hey, Zombie World's on the field, so that Halky Fibrax is a zombie. So I'm gonna banish whatever the fuck I want now. Or if your opponent has themselves a tour guide from the underworld, but you have Zombie World up, well, it's a tour guide from the Zombie World now. Am I right? So you just negate that special summon from the deck, and they're like, damn, what do I do with just one monster? I never had to play like that. And it's really nice. So you can only use one effect of each copy of Doom King Baller Drunk per chain, so you can't both negate a monster effect and banish a monster from the field or graveyard in the same chain. With one copy of Doom King Baller Drunk, you technically can if you have two copies of Baller Drunk in the field, but you can use both effects in the same turn. They're just a hard ones per turn effect for each. And the other nice thing about Baller Drunk is the fact that it does the most zombie thing that zombies could do, which is come back. It's not like your Papa. Oh god, I probably have to edit that part out. As long as you have a field spell anywhere on the field, whether it's your own field or your opponent's field, then Doom King Baller Drunk is coming back from the graveyard in either player's standby phase in defense mode. So, of course, Zombie World being a field spell means that if Baller Drunk is in the graveyard, well, it's no longer in the graveyard. And also, that's right, I'm fully aware that Call by the Grave is a card that everyone plays, so that's kind of why we play two Doom King Baller Drunks. Also, just the fact that it's relatively easy to go into being able to have more than one Doom King Baller Drunk on the field to put more pressure on your opponent, but also because there's a good chance that first one might be subject to a calling that you might not very much like. That's like your basic strategy. That's how you control your opponent's board, by both removing their monsters as well as negating their monsters and having big bodies of your own that can continue coming back. So how do you go into that whole shenanigan in the first place? Well, basically, your best card is Unizombie. Unizombie is like Gazuki, but like ×5. It's a tuner that can mill a card that's a zombie type from your deck to the graveyard by increasing any monster's level on the field by 1. And it can also discard a card from your hand, any card, to increase any monster's level on the field by 1 as well. So basically, your main goal is to use the mill effect, but you also get a lot of value from the discard effect, because sometimes you'll have a monster in your hand that you want to get to the graveyard, and Unizombie helps you set that up. So a lot of times the monster that you're milling or discarding with the Unizombie is your Necroworld Banshee. And the reason for that is because Necroworld Banshee has an effect on the field. Nobody remembers it when we talk about the graveyard effect, which is, as a quick effect, you could banish it to play Zombie World directly from your hand or your deck. which is like your best way of being able to access the zombie world. Even if you don't hard draw the zombie world, you have a way of being able to effectively just mill a searcher for zombie world and then just get it up on the field whenever you're ready to. So that's how you get zombie world on the field. Now, how do you get Doom King Baller Drock on the field? Well, you try your very best to get 2 monsters on the field, your Zombie being the tuner of the bunch, and then any other monster on the field, whether it's by getting a Mitsuki in the graveyard so you can special summon another zombie monster from your graveyard, whether it's using instant fusion or ready fusion to summon one of your 2 fusion monsters that you play as those targets, whether it's by activating reasoning so that you can special summon a monster from your deck, because God forbid your opponent actually calls the right card from it, whether it's using Foolish Burial to essentially set up the Mitsuki play or set up the Gazuki play, which when sent to the graveyard allows you to banish another zombie monster to special summon the zombie monster from your hand. Essentially, all of those are ways for you to be able to extend and be able to get a second body on board, so you can then use your Zombie and your second monster to go to Hauki Fibrax, which will then special summon from the deck the Glow Bloom. That'll allow you to link it off into the Linkaribo, which will then be like Glow Bloom has a graveyard effect, which allows you to banish it to search a level 5 or higher zombie monster. Psych, because you have Zombie World on the field. So instead, you can special summon a level 5 or higher zombie monster. That being the Doom King Baller Drock. There you go. You just turboed out your whole combo line, and it's only turn 1. You're insane. And then what do? Well, you have Hauki Fibrax, don't you remember? And that on your opponent's turn could then be a zombie monster with Zombie World up that banishes to special summon a Formula Synchron from your extra deck, triggering Doom King Baller Drock's effect to negate Hauki. Just kidding, to banish a monster on the field or graveyards. And then after you're done with your Baller Drock, you could be like, hey, Formula Synchron, level 2 plus level 8 is really good because there's a new Synchro monster out that's really, really good. And you use the Formula Synchron and Baller Drock to make yourself a Baron de Fleur, and now you just have yourself some more disruption on top of the disruption that Doom King Baller Drock already provided. And then next turn, as long as you can keep your Zombie World on the field, Baller Drock comes back and you continue to have the pressure of that card alongside what Baron de Fleur is already providing in terms of pressure onto your opponent. So it's a very standard, very relatively consistent turn 1 combo that could be even more cracked depending on how you open. So that's why we play Zombie. It's kind of your most important card for most situations in terms of being a starter. And we also play 3 copies of Solitaire because Solitaire tributes itself to special summon your Zombie. Technically, you can special summon Glow Bloom, which in these situations you might want to do instead, but generally you're treating Solitaire as 3 more copies of Zombie. And that's why we also play 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. Pot of Prosperity lets us basically dig further for our deck so we could see either our starter, Zombie, or an extender to go alongside the Zombie, whether it's the instant fusion or reasoning we talked about. Pot of Prosperity helps us basically make our hand pop off the way we need it to and gives us a lot more consistency. Usually I'm just like, I have no courage that my top 3 activations are good, so I'm just like, YOLO, I'm banishing 6 from the extra deck. We're going in. If they ask you because they saw we were so desperate to banish 6, well, hey, I already had Zombie in my hand. That means I don't have to worry about Ash Blossom on Zombie. Let's go, YouTube. But yeah, generally, like the extra deck, there's a lot of cards you can play in the extra deck, but there's not a lot of cards that you necessarily need in the extra deck. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of banishing 6 cards, and then even still having 3 more cards to banish for like a follow Pot of Prosperity if you still happen to have one for the next turn. So usually your core is really just Linkaribo, Hauki Fibrax, and whatever Synchro tuners you're summoning off of the Hauki Fibrax alongside Baron de Fleur. So really, typically 4 cards that you really will need to do your general combo line, which leaves you with like 11 extra cards that are like nice to have, but you don't necessarily need to have. So it makes it relatively easy to get like a nice grab into your deck to be able to get whatever missing combo piece or text or whatever shenanigans you need to be able to, win the game or at least control it. So even though it's not technically 3 more copies of Zombie, it essentially counts as 3 more chances of being able to get Zombie, or something like a Foolish Burial that can help set up your graveyard as well, or something like even a Gazuki. Gazuki, while is not a tuner and makes it a lot more difficult to set up Hauki Fibrax plays, can still let you mill a zombie monster, so you could then end up milling, let's say, Necroworld Banshee, and if you happen to have instant fusion or ready fusion, you can go ahead and fusion summon the sea monster of Theseus, so you can still go into Hauki Fibrax, special summon the Glow Bloom, and that right there is still combo without even needing Zombie for that whole shenanigan. It's still worth playing because it can still pop off, and also because there's a really nice combo line that you could do with Gazuki, Mitsuki, and Zombie, where if you have Zombie or some type of access to it, as well as either Gazuki or Mitsuki in your hand, then what you do is use Zombie to mill the other one, and then discard the one that you do have in your hand. What that allows you to do is use Mitsuki's effect to then special summon Gazuki, and now you have 2 bodies on board, so you have have an easy Halki Fibrax. Meanwhile, Gazuki could go ahead and be the miller for Necroworld Banshee, and then you do your standard Baller Drock off of the Glow Bloom combo line while having Halki Fibrax into Formula Synchron into Baron de Fleur shenanigans. It feels really nice, and it is really nice. Okay, just trust me on it. Now, what happens when you just have every single special summon in the game? You're just like, I'm not done with just Gazuki and Unizombie. What do? We go into Halki Fibrax, special summon the Glow Bloom. But what do we do with the other monster that's left over? Well, we use Glow Bloom alongside that remaining monster so we could go into Artifact Dogda. As long as we have some type of access to the Zombie World, whether through Banshee in the graveyard or Zombie World already active on the field, we can still resolve Glow Bloom's effect, especially summon the Doom King Baller Drock, while ending on a board of that alongside Crystal Halki Fibrax and the Artifact Dogda. So that in the next turn, when you finally get priority back for the main phase, you can go ahead and activate Halki Fibrax's effect to banish, triggering your ability to activate Dogda's effect, so you could then go ahead and set Artifact Site directly from your deck. Then, on resolution of Halki Fibrax's effect, you'll be able to Synchro Summon into TG Wonder Magician, which on summon is going to allow you to then pop a spell trap on the field. This is mandatory, so make sure like your opponent isn't smart, because sometimes they're super smart and they'll be like, hey, I'm going to chain block Artifact Dogda, by the way, so you're supposed to pop your own Zombie World. So if that happens, summon Formula Synchron instead. So essentially, you summon the TG Wonder Magician so that you can then pop the Artifact Site you set off of the Artifact Dogda. That's going to allow you to then summon the Artifact Site, which will then lock out your opponent from summoning from the extra deck. That's really good. Then you have two level 5s, a tuner and a non-tuner, so you can then Synchro Summon into Baron de Fleur on your opponent's turn. So you have your Omni Negate, and you could just leave your Doom King Baller Drock chilling. It could still do its thing without having to rush its negates and banishes so that it can be synchroned off with Formula Synchron. No, you're keeping it on the field to fight alongside your Baron de Fleur this time. So that's like kind of like one of your best turn 1 plays you could do. And it's not as common as the Halki Fibrax into Link Karibo and Baller Drock play line, but it's consistent enough, and that's why we play so many extenders like the aforementioned one that we mentioned before. So it's really nice, and yeah, that's pretty much the shenanigans. Necroworld Banshee has this effect that nobody remembers, which is that if it's on the field, Zombie World in the field zone cannot be destroyed by card effects, nor can it be targeted by other player with card effects, which never actually comes up because you're trying to get this card in the graveyard ASAP as possible. But it could be kind of crazy if you happen to have Necroworld Banshee on the field. Then your opponent activates Harpies, Feather Duster, or Lightning Storm. You're like, okay, thanks anyway. So that's really cool to keep in mind. But the big thing is sometimes you're in a situation where you don't have the ability to get a Necroworld Banshee on the field, but you really are live or die by Zombie World, keeping your Doom King Baller Drock in terms of controlling the field. Because honestly, if your opponent's monsters aren't zombies because Zombie World's not on the field, then Doom King Baller Drock is effectively just a beater. That's not really doing anything unless your opponent just happens to be playing a zombie deck, which if they're playing Eldritch, congratulations if they didn't open crack. If possible, milling another Necroworld Banshee, even if you already have access to Zombie World already, sometimes ends up being beneficial just by virtue of being a quick effect zombie monster that you can activate whenever you want to trigger Baller Drock's Banish. That's why we like to play it at least 2 copies. 3 feels a little bricky, but 2 feels like a sweet spot and giving you a lot of follow-up in case your Zombie World gets dealt with, because if like your Zombie World gets dealt with, well, any miller allows you to just effectively play Zombie World from the deck. And if it's turn 2 onwards and you have the ability to go into the battle phase, you have an extra deck miller in Avenged Savior, which just requires 2 zombie monsters. And what it does is when Avenged Savior attacks, it allows you to mill a zombie monster from your deck for cost so that you can reduce the monster that you're attacking into its attack by the level of the monster you milled. So essentially, like, you don't really care about the reduction effect. Hell, if Avenged Savior crashes into something in attack mode and die, doesn't matter because you milled for cost. So whatever, we'll take the 200 attack reduction so we can mill Glow Bloom to special summon Baller Drock, or mill the Necroworld Banshee so we could set up Zombie World in the graveyard, or whatever we need to get into the graveyard. Let's say we want to get Mitsuki in the graveyard, we can use Avenged Savior for that. So Avenged Savior, it's one of those extra deck monsters that's there for utility. Since this doesn't really end up being useful turn 1, since it is specifically a battle phase oriented effect, you don't see it pop up as often, but in certain situations where it's awkward, especially turn 2 onwards, where you're missing a combo piece in the graveyard, sometimes Avenged Savior could be the difference between you actually having a combo and you not. So even if it comes up 5% of the time, those 5% of the time, you're just like, man, Vengeance are a cool archetype, aren't they? I know a lot of people like to play 2 Mitsuki. I was initially playing 2 Mitsuki, but I replaced with a copy of Jet Synchron, mostly just because I was seeing Mitsuki too often without any like actual combo lines, aka like a Unizombie, for example. Mitsuki is amazing in hand if you have a Unizombie to go along with it, but if it's just Mitsuki and like like Gazuki or just Mitsuki by itself, then you're just a little madge. So that's why I kind of replaced it with a Jet Synchron. But that was before I was playing 3 Proud of Prosperity. I was playing 3 Maxi instead. And I kind of decided to cut down to 2 Maxi so I still had the utility when going second, but so I could see it less as like an annoying card when I'm going first. I've basically figured that Proud of Prosperity is a much more versatile card going first while still achieving the same purpose of letting me dig into whatever combo piece I need, while still having the option to have Maxi to be like, hey, I have Maxi, I'm a gamer. So I think that makes having 2 copies of Mitsuki more valid, because then you'll be able to see it alongside like your Uni-Zombie combo line more often and actually be able to pop off with it. That being said, I did replace the second copy with Jet Synchron just for shenanigans. Let's say for whatever reason you just cannot access Zombie World, like either your opponent ashed you to death and you weren't able to achieve your mills to get into Necro Banshee, or just something crazy happened. Well, you could still go into your Haki Firebrax combo, so you could then special summon Jet Synchron to link it off to Link Karibo, so you could then use the effect of Jet Synchron in the graveyard, so you can special summon it by discarding any card in your hand, so you could then go into Artifact Dagda. Even without Doom King Baller Drock, that's still technically Artifact Sight combo into Baron de Fleur that could lock your opponent out of the extra deck while giving you an Omni Negate. Pretty much any deck could do this, so it's like a worst case scenario that allows you to at least have some kind of play, and then you hope that your follow-up can allow you to capitalize on the hopefully significant tempo shift that you were able to achieve by just saying no to your opponent from playing the game. That being said, Jet Synchron could also just like be a combo starter in itself under the right conditions. Let's say if your hand is just Jet Synchron and Necroworld Banshee, for example, normally Jet Synchron to go to Link Karibo and then discarding Banshee from Jet Synchron's effect to bring Jet Synchron to the field is full combo, because then you go to Haki Firebrax using Link Karibo and Jet Synchron, switch them to Glow Bloom, and then use Link Karibo's effect in the graveyard. Yeah, that's right, it has an effect in the graveyard to then tribute the Glow Bloom, so you can special summon back that Link Karibo, allowing you to trigger the effect of Glow Bloom to change the Necroworld Banshee's effect to play the Zombie World, so they could then summon the Doom King Baller Drock, and just like that, you have combo. So it's nice, a little bit of utility, but I think I just played it just for the spice, but I think there's a lot of validity into playing 2 Mitsuki, and there's a lot of times where I do miss having the second copy of Mitsuki, because again, it's not a once per turn effect, so there are situations where you can theoretically get 2 Mitsukis in the graveyard, and anything is a zombie monster with Zombie World in the graveyard, so you could bring back crazy shenanigan cards, like let's say if your opponent dealt with Krishan Haki Firebrax, well hey, you can bring it back, and then you can try again, and it just like helps you with link climbs that help you achieve your OTK turn 3 a lot quicker, because let's say if you get 2 Mitsukis in the graveyard, that helps you link climb into a Nightmare Unicorn, into an Axis Code Talker. An Axis Code Talker with 5300 attack plus Doom King Baller Drock is 8100 attack. That's lethal, by the way, so that's something to keep in mind, and it's a very nice thing to keep in mind. Other than that, we play Vampire Sucker. Vampire Sucker is an interesting card because we don't go into it that much in this version, but it does have some relevant effects. One being that you could target any monster in your opponent's graveyard to special summon it and treat it as a zombie monster, and 2, that you could tribute zombie monsters your opponent controls to tribute summon one of your zombie monsters, which is kind of hilarious because if you have Zombie World up and you have Doom King Baller Drock in the hand and you somehow have Vampire Sucker on the field, your opponent has 2 monsters on board, well, you just kaiju both of them to get a Baller Drock on the board, which is like a 1 in 10 million situation, but when it pops off, you're laughing your ass off. It's great. But the more important effect being the fact that you can target one monster in your opponent's graveyard to special summon it to your opponent's field in defense position. That sometimes pops up turn 1 so that you could like special summon an opponent's hand trap like an Ash Blossom, so you could have a body on their side of the field to turn off a potential Lightning Storm, because a lot of people do be playing that in ranked, and man, it do be sucking when you lose your Zombie World to something like Lightning Storm. But more importantly is the second effect, which is if a zombie monster is special summoned from either graveyard, draw 1 card. So just using Vampire Sucker's first effect does trigger to draw, but let's say if Doom King Baller Drock comes back from the standby phase, that also triggers the draw. So theoretically, you could, on your first turn after you set up Haki Firebrax and Karibo and Doom King Baller Drock, you can link off Baller Drock to summon Sucker on your opponent's standby phase, you bring back Baller Drock, and that gives you a draw. So it's a nice way of garnering card advantage. The only thing is, of course, just as a reminder, Call by the Grave is like the most popular card or something, and Baller Drock really hates that card. So usually you have to weigh the risk and the reward. Do you need to go into Vampire Sucker and get some draws? Is it the difference between you being able to really keep up the tempo, or is it more just like a greedy type of draw situation? A lot of times I was going to Vampire Sucker in the beginning, and I was getting hard punished for it. So just out of caution, I just ended up just foregoing the Vampire Sucker play a lot of the time. But if I have Crossout Designator, then I will go into Vampire Sucker, so I could just reliably go and be able to like negate the Call by the Grave using Crossout Designator. In fact, that's really why I like Crossout Designator. It's just so useful in stopping a lot of common cards that would otherwise stop us, whether it's Called by the Grave, whether it's an opponent's Maxi, whether it's opponent's Ash Blossom. It's just a really powerful card that allows us to go ahead and say, hey, I know you tried to stop me from playing the game, but I don't like that. We can even call Nibiru. We play it at 1 copy because Nibiru is good when there's like a lot of cards being summoned, because otherwise we struggle. But also because it's nice to be able to negate Nibiru, because it's hard for us to play around Nibiru. We're not dead to Nibiru because full combo usually ends up resulting in us having over 5 monsters, but by the time we get to that 5 monster point, we have Glow Bloom on the field with Zombie World Axis, which means we get Ballardrock on the field. So even if they Nibiru it away, it still comes back next turn, and as long as we still have Zombie World on the field, that means we at least still have ourselves a strategy. It significantly reduces the ceiling of what our strategy is, since we don't no longer have the Hockey 5-Rex, for example. So, both in being able to stop Nibiru, but also being able to play Nibiru makes playing Nibiru worth it. Because going second is hard, alright? That's why we play so many cards that go second in general. That's why we play the Forbidden Droplet, because monsters with the gates basically tell us we suck. We are so much a going first deck. It's insane how much of a going first deck we are. We really do lose to a lot of disruption, and sometimes you can play through disruption, but we're relatively fragile until we're set up. So you really want to be going first with this deck, and that's why I kind of built the ratio so that we have as much consistency when we do go first. That's why I play cards like Pot of Prosperity, but at least have cards in our deck that allow us to continue to have a chance if we go second. So cards like Maxi, cards like Forbidden Droplets, Ash Blossom, Nibiru can at least give us a semblance of a chance to try to play the game and hope for the best. So, honestly, the only problem with Forbidden Droplet, it's an amazing card, it's very versatile, and could fit very well with the theme of zombies wanting to go into the graveyard. The problem is, if you're facing a monster-heavy deck that, like, spams out 5 insanely powerful monsters that you have to negate, so yeah, you could activate something like a Reasoning or a Foolish Burial, then chain the Forbidden Droplet, so you could send that activated spell card as part of your cost, so it gives you a little bit of utility there for sure, but at the end of the day, strategy doesn't work well at playing with just 1 card or even 2 cards. So, like, when we have to negate just 1 or 2 problematic boss monsters, Forbidden Droplet is amazing. When we have to negate more, then usually you're not going to be able to capitalize on that because you don't have enough cards to be able to then follow up with actually establishing a big enough board that could then also stop your opponent's follow-up from being anything impactful. So that's why a lot of times when I face off, let's say, like, Pens spamming out 5 negates, that's why I really wish I had, like, Dark Ruler No More instead in a lot of situations. And I think for a deck like this, ironically, we play worse from the graveyard versus a deck like Drytrons. We're not like Numerons that could be like, all right, goodbye hand, I have my field spell. There are a lot of situations where just like activating 1 spell, Dark Ruler No More, and just having the rest of your hand free to be able to do whatever else you want would really be super beneficial. So I think even though it's almost a meme, nobody plays Dark Ruler No More, this is actually one of those decks that like benefits the most from it. Even though your opponent doesn't take any battle damage the turn you activated, it's okay because your goal is into OTK turn 2. Your goal is to control the board at the end of turn 2 and then continue to control the board there afterwards. So I think Dark Ruler No More, if I had to choose between the two, if I had Dark Ruler No More, I would opt to play it. But that being said, Forbidden Droplet is versatile, does achieves the same things, and sometimes even better, and it's more versatile as well. So I think it really depends on which one you have and which is what you're running into more, which would be better for you. I think I talked about pretty much every card and why we play it, except one last one. We talked about Sea Monster of Theseus. It's both an instant fusion target as well as ready fusion, in that you can go ahead and summon it as a second body to go into Hockey 5-Rex off of like a Uni-Zombie combo line or even Necrorel Banshee. But also, we play Millennium Eyes Restrict. Now, the reason we play Millennium Eyes Restrict is because it's an instant fusion target. Now, it doesn't come up super often, but it could come up enough that it's just worthwhile. Also, because we have the flexibility in the extra deck for it. Essentially, if we have, let's say, Uni-Zombie or Solitaire or even Pot of Prosperity and instant fusion, we activate instant fusion, bring out the Millennium Eyes Restrict, and then we go ahead and normal summon the Solitaire, tribute it to special summon Uni-Zombie, for example, right? Well, whenever we try to use Uni-Zombie's effect or Shiranui Solitaire's effect, normally they're huge targets for Ash Blossom. Like, we get so killed by Ash Blossom, it's crazy. The Millennium Eyes Restrict is going to be like, hey, I'm basically called by the grave on legs, so you instant fusion into it, and then you stop your opponent from being able to actually negate your Solitaire or your Uni-Zombie, and you can just go ahead and mill Ash free, and if they don't read and they decide to Ash you anyway, way, well, you steal their Ash and you big chillin'. It like gives you a little bit of utility. It's a more restrictive Called by the Grave since your goal forward is to link it off eventually. But if you get more than just the Millennium Eyes Restrict, let's say if you have Zombie and then another monster to link off into Halki Fibrex, the Millennium Eyes Restrict just ends up being just blanket protection against like a lot of hand traps for the duration of that turn, which is really nice utility. It seems odd to just devote a tech spot for just instant fusion, but to me I think of it as just like one more copy of a Called by the Grave type effect, and essentially giving us 3 Called by the Grave, and with 2 cross out Designated being another way to stop Ash Blossom, ends up being strong. And in certain combo lines, you can actually bring back that Millennium Eyes Restrict and then keep it forever, because instant fusion destroys the monster summon off of it. But let's say if you link off the Millennium Eyes into Halki Fibrex, and then you were able to get Mitsuki into the graveyard, well, hey, Zombie World's on the field. Millennium Eyes Restrict is a zombie, don't at me. You have Mitsuki managed, special summon Millennium Eyes Restrict, and Dennis remember that it was summoned off of instant fusion. Don't at me, it was summoned off of Mitsuki. Now you have yourself another negate alongside Baller's Rock and possibly Baron de Fleur. Look how many negates we have. We're basically a tier 0 deck-ish, maybe not so much, but you know what I mean. It's great and it's fun and it's all that good stuff. So those are the core of the extra deck. A lot of it is just there just as supplemental and not necessary in most situations, but are nice to have. I play Shadow the Saga just because we can. I promised I would take it out when Baron came out, but then there was a situation where I had to face off against the 3100 attack Nibiru token, and I was like, man, that 3000 attack Omni negate is not doing anything against that beat stick. So I was like, you know what, the 3500 beat stick with sometimes protection with Solitaire in the graveyard and also just being able to non-target pop, you know, it's nice to have since we have room for it. Basically, you synchro summon using any of your synchro tuners. Since Zombie World's on the field, all your synchro monsters are zombie monsters, so Shiranui Sansaga returns all zombie synchros from the graveyard and bench pile to the extra deck to pop a card on the field not targetable equal to the number of your turn. So your Wonder Magician or Formula Synchron that was sent to the graveyard, counted as zombies, can be returned to the extra deck, and you get yourself a non-target pop. You're like 7 jillion% of the time going into Baron de Fleur, but hey, we have room for it, so in case you need the beat stick or just for whatever reason really need to prioritize a pop, for whatever reason, like let's say you need to pop a big beat stick, then that's where the value of Shiranui Sansaga comes in. But if you don't have Sansaga, then just don't craft it, please. I would never ask you to do such. Your only real essential crafts here, IMO, are Link Karibo, Halki Fibrex, and Baron de Fleur. And then if you're playing Sight version, Artifact Sight is just like a non-engine essential craft, but the essential engine crafts are Unizombie, Baller Drock, and Zombie World in terms of main deck cores that are URs. The good thing about the secret pack that lets you get all those cards is that you get Unizombie, Duking Baller Drock, Zombie World, and Avenger Savior off of one secret pack. It's like the best secret pack in the world. Open it. You're gonna get everything you want. Trust me. Trust me. And last but not least, we just play Nightmare Cerberus and Nightmare Phoenix just for the utility. I honestly never summoned them in my climb, so this could be like flex spots. This could be IP and Appaloosa. This could be other synchro monsters like Psyframe Omega. It could be Chaos Ruler, the magical, chaotic something, however pronounced in whatever order dragon, which is good in theory, but we play a lot more non-darks in the deck than it seems, since like Shiranui Solitaire is a fire monster, for example, so it doesn't always pop off. You can play Borreload Savage Dragon, but in this version, you're almost never going to be able to make Savage Dragon with a link equipped to it turn 1, so in my opinion, it just win more in the cases where you would summon it, but there's a lot of utility, a lot of flex spots in the extra deck based on how you want to play it, and so it's really nice. And that is the deck. Thank you so much, and that is pretty much all I had to say about that. I know I just talked a whole lot. I kept saying, man, I made it all too long. I'm going to make this one so quick, and now it's 20 minutes later.